of Science and Global Security, an editor of the Journal for Peace and Nuclear Disarmament. Please.
Thank you very much. In preparing for this panel, I think Professor Lim asked us to address the issue of the role of nuclear exporters in global nuclear non-proliferation in the future. So in that regard, I will start my presentation with a discussion about China as a potential leading nuclear energy exporter and its potential implications. And then I will make some comments about the future trends of both horizontal and vertical nuclear non-proliferation. So firstly, China as a potential leading nuclear exporter in the future. The traditional wisdom is that by 2050, China is likely to possess hundreds of nuclear power plants, and becoming the leading producer of nuclear electricity and the global leader in setting rules in nuclear governance. Indeed, Beijing has made efforts in this area. It has consolidated a number of big state-owned nuclear enterprises into even bigger ones to make them internationally competitive. And Chinese firms can provide very attractive financing incentives to its foreign clients. And if China is capable of making real progress in the fuel cycle technology in the future, then the Chinese nuclear industry would be in a position of being able to provide full fuel cycle service to its clients, starting from uranium conversion, enrichment, fuel production, all the way to the designs of nuclear reactor construction and operation of nuclear plants, and all the way to spent fuel and waste management, so full fuel cycle service. And if China becomes an important supplier of nuclear materials, technologies, and equipment, China will be able to possess greater influence over the energy and technology policies of its client countries. And that will also have important geopolitical implications. One example is China has already included its nuclear technology export in its Belt and Road Initiative. So with the expansion of Chinese nuclear exports, Chinese geopolitical influence, important regions in this world might also influence as well. But all these assessments are based on very optimistic evaluation of China's future economic performance. China has been able to sustain high GDP growth rates for decades. Its electricity demand also saw sustainable growth over the past decades. And Chinese government was able to invest a lot into nuclear technology and nuclear industry. And if we look at the percentage of Chinese nuclear as part of its overall electricity production, there seems to be great potential for further growth. Right now, Chinese nuclear electricity only consists of 4.5% of overall electricity production, and that number, according to current projection, will only grow to about 10% in 2030. So there's still major room for further expansion. However, I think many people start to believe that the real economic picture in the future might be very different. This year, I think the official Chinese GDP growth number is around 6%. But many people worry that even this number has been greatly inflated. There has been wide reports of fraudulent GDP reports from local governments. Some scholars started to point out that the real Chinese GDP is actually only about 1/4 of the US right now, which is a much lower number compared to the traditional wisdom. As a result, the future electricity consumption might not grow rapidly. And also the Chinese government is in deep debts right now, especially at the local level, which means it might not be able to support continuous capital investment into the nuclear industry. And meanwhile, the current nuclear expansion plan was really drafted when the Chinese officials, those technocrats, they were not subject to public scrutiny. But now the public trust in government regulation is declining in general. There has been major scandals over the quality of milk, the quality of vaccine, the quality of medicine, and people are worried that the quality of the nuclear plants might also be problematic. So there's growing public skepticism about building more nuclear projects, and this "not in my backyard" sentiment is very popular among the general public. After Fukushima, China basically stopped building inland nuclear power plants, and that's partly a result of growing public opposition together with opposition from some nuclear experts. In the meantime, Chinese decision makers also become more risk averse when it comes to nuclear energy expansion, because they understand that if there are any serious nuclear incidents, the general public will hold the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, accountable, which makes the decision maker increasingly reluctant to take that risk. All these mean that there is actually a big uncertainty about the future prospect of China being a leading international nuclear energy exporter. So, in case that China succeeds in doing that, then I think it would need to work hard in a number of areas to address potential international concerns. One is about the safety, security, and non-proliferation standards. China itself is still in the process of learning the best practices regarding nuclear safety, security, and non-proliferation standards. The lack of serious nuclear incidents in China has increased complacency within the government. And also the safety security culture in general is not impeccable. And there are important commercial interests for pushing for rapid nuclear expansion. As I said, the government subsidy for domestic nuclear power plants is likely to decline over time, so there will be growing need for the Chinese nuclear industry to occupy foreign markets in order to sustain their profit. We have already seen that China exporting its Hualong-1 nuclear reactor to countries like Pakistan and Argentina before that reactor design was fully tested. There is also, I think, political driver for nuclear exports. Nuclear power plant is listed by the Chinese government as two of China's most important name cards for China's high-tech exports. The other one being the high-speed train. So being able to make nuclear deals starts to gain political importance for the CEOs of Chinese nuclear companies. So for all these cultural, commercial, and political reasons, I think the consequence is that China may not impose more than the minimum requirement on nuclear safety, security, and non-proliferation on its client countries. The second concern is if China succeeds in expanding its nuclear power and become a major nuclear exporter, China itself is investing a lot in experimenting with the closed fuel cycle, making great efforts to build fast breeder reactors, reprocessing capacity, etc. So if China succeeds in closing its own fuel cycle, and if China becomes a major nuclear energy power in the future, its choice of this closed fuel cycle might encourage other countries to follow suit. And that will increase non-proliferation concerns. I think there are at least two solutions to mitigate this concern. One is that China really should increase its own awareness and understandings about the risks of a closed fuel cycle. And then to develop advanced export control measures to control the export of fast reactors, reprocessing capacity, etc. Right now, there doesn't appear to be a high level of awareness or even a discussion of those risks within China. Second is for China to contribute more to international fuel banks and other international nuclear fuel supply mechanisms in order to reduce the incentives of other countries to follow suit and develop their own closed fuel cycle industry, nuclear industry. So far, China has not been very proactive in promoting international fuel banks, etc. So that's another area China can and should do more. And also, given the topic of this panel is about how to prepare for the future of global nuclear non-proliferation, I want to focus my following discussions on both the horizontal non-proliferation and also vertical non-proliferation prospects. As you know, horizontal proliferation refers to the further proliferation of nuclear weapons to additional countries, and vertical proliferation means existing nuclear capable countries building new nuclear capabilities, better nuclear weapons, bigger arsenals, etc. Regarding horizontal non-proliferation, apparently there are two regions of high proliferation risks. One is East Asia and the other being Middle East. Middle East has already been discussed in the previous panel. So in East Asia, as I discussed yesterday, I think North Korea is going to continue possessing nuclear weapons for a long time. But I'm not very concerned about either South Korea or Japan going nuclear in the future. Especially, I think, given the democratic nature of these countries, the risk is manageable. And we should focus our efforts on educating North Korea, and for North Korea to learn to respect and adopt international norms and confidence building measures, to stick to a minimum deterrence posture to avoid embracing destabilizing nuclear postures. If those measures can be done, then we can further reduce the incentive of South Korea and Japan to go nuclear themselves.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, and I think what I'm more worried is about the low prospects for big powers to conduct real cooperation among themselves to contain proliferation. China, for example, still possesses a very cynical view about American non-proliferation policy. The mainstream view in China is the U.S. Exercises double standards when it comes to non-proliferation. The U.S. asks China to disarm North Korea, but itself doesn't take measures to disarm Israel, etc. So that cynical view makes China, I think, less motivated to cooperate substantively with US and others in controlling further proliferation. And also, if we broaden non-proliferation regime to include also chemical and biological weapons, I think a long-term challenge is big powers start to disagree on basic facts. If we talk about this recent incident of the use of chemical weapons in Syria, the vast majority of Western experts firmly believe it is the Syrian government that used chemical weapons. But 95% or over 95% of serious Chinese experts, I'm not talking about general public, experts firmly believe it is not the Syrian government. It must be other groups that use chemical weapons. So they are basically disagreeing about what is happening on the ground. And that disagreement over basic fact is making it impossible for them to be on the same page on non-proliferation issues and not possible to cooperate substantively to contain proliferation. I'll briefly talk about the vertical non-proliferation in a couple of minutes. I think there is at least one important international factor that is driving vertical proliferation. That is the Cold War model of mutually assured destruction is not sustainable anymore, especially because non-nuclear technologies, missile defense, conventional hypersonic weapons, even cyber weapons, they can greatly increase the vulnerability of nuclear weapon systems and their command control systems. They can create big threat perception in countries like Russia and China. And there is no way that these countries can reach agreement on how much missile defense can be justified, how much conventional precision weapons each country can build, how advanced each other's cyber technology can develop, and how advanced each other's AI technology can be developed. Without those agreements, there is no way that they can basically reach basic agreement on whether they have achieved mutually assured destruction relationship. So that foundation for traditional strategic stability is being eroded. So that's a major incentive for vertical proliferation. I think this is a major structural problem because it is created by new technologies. And we really need deep research to start addressing this. And so far, I haven't seen such work being done. So maybe you young scholars should focus some effort in resolving this problem. And I'll also briefly mention a domestic factor contributing to greater vertical proliferation. I think there is still a popular view among all the major nuclear powers that nuclear weapons can really enhance national prestige and can also win countries' international respect. In the United States, Trump apparently supports that view. In Russia, Putin also alluded to that view. In China, we can constantly hear people making views that if China gets bigger nuclear arsenal, the US would never interfere in the South China Sea or over the Taiwan Strait. So we really need to take these problematic arguments head on and fight them. Again, I think I really encourage you, young scholars, young leaders in the future, to think more seriously about these issues, about these arguments, and to make your voice heard against these very problematic arguments that would contribute to proliferation in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. So.